Hey everybody, so we are going to be doing an acrylic painting demo. Ignore any background noise, my kiddos are here right now. So what you're going to need to paint with acrylic, you want to make sure that you have a palette. This one is wrapped in saran wrap, that way I can, let me take this mask off. That way I can clean up much more easily. I can just take this saran wrap off and throw away anything that I don't use, or if I need to save this paint, I can wrap it up in some more saran wrap and just hold on to it to make sure that it doesn't dry out. So the colors that I have yellow, I've got blue, I've got black, I've got white. For this particular exercise, I am making a value sort of painting. I'm using my reference right here. I drew it down here already, and I'm going to be making a yellow green. So that's why I have these two colors here, and I'm going to need to be adding some white and some black to it. I need some water, obviously. I don't need a ton. I need paintbrushes. I've got two sizes right now, one slightly bigger, one slightly smaller. Since I don't have a very big image, I don't need more than that. And I've got some paper towels. One other thing that you might want is some kind of apron to protect your clothes. So first thing that I'm gonna do, I am going to wet my brush a little bit, dab off the excess, and I'm gonna make my base color. So this is one value drawing, so I need everything to kind of start from a base color. So I'm gonna take my darker color, which is blue, and I'm gonna add it a little bit at a time to my yellow until I get a green that I like. And you can see that one little scoop of blue was really all I needed to get a nice limeish green, yellow green. So I have way too much blue, but that's fine. I tried to get very little, so I'll be okay. Now I'm gonna have this as my base sort of color. This would be in this little scale, my little swatch scale. This is gonna be kind of my mid-tone. Now you can see that my mid-tone is very thin. Yellow tends to be a little bit see-through as a color, so I need to be very careful when I'm putting this color down. It will be a little bit see-through. Not all colors are, some are less see-through than others, but this one is fairly see-through, so I might need multiple coats of it, or I might need to just make sure that I'm being careful where I have its edges and such. All right, so I'm gonna take this and I'm going to make some more colors. So I'm gonna pull some out using my paintbrush that is fairly clean, not perfectly, but fairly. And I need 4 different spools because I have 5 swatches that I need to make. This is my base color, so I need a really light, I need a really dark, I need some in between those stages. All right, so I'm gonna clean my brush again. To clean my brush, I'm just kind of tapping against the bottom, swooshing a little bit. I don't have too much water, that way it won't spill out on me. But what I need to make sure of is that if I'm wiping my brush onto my paper towel, I don't have any color coming out, and that tells me that I'm doing this about right. So I'm gonna take my black, I'm gonna get just a smidge of black. You can see that it's just a little bit. I'm gonna add it to one of these little pots. And that should make a darker green. So this one here is going to be my next swatch down. And there's that. Clean off again. Get a little bit more black this time, maybe a little bit less, and mix it in with my next batch of green. Now the first time I mixed it, it's about the same as my first one. So that means I need to add a little bit more black to this. So I'm gonna come grab a little bit more, add a little bit more. I want there to be a definite, obvious difference between these two shades. So I'm gonna keep adding little bits of black until I have a very dark green. Okay. Now, if I wanted, I could pause here and start painting in my different dark areas just to make sure that my paints don't dry out. Or I could continue on and mix all of my colors first. It really is up to you how you decide and what order you decide to do this in. I prefer doing it by mixing them all first and then painting down, but that is going to be a personal choice that you make. All right, so I'm gonna do the same thing the opposite direction. I'm gonna be adding some white into my color to make a lighter version of that color. And that's my next swatch along. And then I'll be getting a lot more white to put into my last one. And again, I want to make sure that there's a definite difference between these two colors. On the camera, there might be a little bit less difference, but there is a pretty strong difference between them now. If I want to make it even stronger, just add a little bit more white. Remember that adding a light color to a dark color, you generally have to add a lot more in order to change it. Since I started with a fairly light color, I don't need too much white to change it. But in this particular case, that's just how it is. If I were trying to change a blue, I would probably start with white and put a little bit of color into that. All right, so from here, whenever I'm painting with acrylic, you want to start in the back and move to the front. So in this particular case, my background color is my very, very lightest color, and that's going to go all in my background area. So I've outlined where it is, and it's okay, I can paint over my edges a little bit. That just makes sure that I don't have any white gaps in my painting. And I'm just gonna come in, I'm gonna start painting this in all the areas that need that super bright white. I can also come in and do the same on my figure if I so choose, because she does have just one highlight spot on the top of her nose where I have the absolute whitest of colors, which is right there in her nose. I have that one little white spot. So if I wanted to come in and do that on her right now, I could do that as well. But again, the main thing that I'm worrying about is that I'm getting just slightly over most of my edges so that I won't have any white gaps later. All right, so I'm gonna throw in that little highlight on her nose. I might need to come and clean that up again later, but that's what we're gonna start with. All right, and then I have my next lightest color, or whatever's next. So next would be probably the edge of her body, which is my next lightest color. So I'm gonna grab that here. And it's just a tiny halo around the outside edge of her hair. And it's also in the corners of my background. So I'm going to come in and put those in my background. Keep coughing. And what I'm noticing right now is that some of my paint is watered down a little bit so that my two colors are seeming very, very similar, which means that I do need to wait for it to dry so that I can go over it a second time. But once I have my first coat on, then it shouldn't be too much of an issue to get a second coat on there. All right, I have this same light color, just a little bit around the edges of her ears. So I'm going to be coming on and adding that on as well. I'm going to keep doing this process, kind of working my way from the outside in, or rather in this particular case, from the back to the front, until I have my whole little painting done. All right, so I'm about midway through this painting. You can see that I started working on the neck a lot because that's further back than the face, etc. And on the face, I'm generally going to work kind of from the back forward again, so from the edges towards the middle because the nose sticks out the furthest. But what I've noticed is that I'm running pretty low on my darkest color, so I need to remake some of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scoop some of this off to the side. That helps me compare my new color with my old, and I'm gonna remix it. So exactly what I did before. I'm going to scoop some of my main color, which I still have plenty of, into this little basket, so to speak. I do need to be careful not to get any of that darker batch that's in there into my original color, because I do not want that to mix together. And then I need to get little amounts of black until I have a color that matches my saved amount up here. So if I mix in the amount of black that I just grabbed, it is just a little too light. You might not be able to tell in my camera, but promise that it's just a little too light. So I'm going to grab just a little bit more black and mix that in. And that looks just about perfect. So again, always work in small amounts. You can always add a little more. You cannot really take any out. Or you're just going to find yourself frustrated trying to match a color like endlessly, and you're going to end up with way too much paint. So that's how you're going to mix a little bit more if you need to. So if I were to suggest a color to make a little bit more than you need, it's going to be your base color. That one is the one that's going to be the hardest to get for a second time. All right, so this is still about 3/4 of the way done. Just want to point out that this color right here and this color right here are the same color. The only difference between the two is that this one has been gone over only one time, this one's gone over twice. You can also see over here in my eye, I've got a lot more detail being put into this one than to this one over here. This is my base layer. I basically just put my main color in this area, and this one I've gone over a couple of times. I've refined it a bit more. Basically, I just kind of pull in tighter and tighter to what areas I need as I add opacity to my colors. So you can see again right here, first layer looks terrible, much sad. As I keep working, it starts to get better. So if you start over here and you're like, oh no, I've messed up, I need to restart everything. No, you don't. You just need to keep going. Just keep going and you will find a place that starts to look good. Do not give up. All right, so this is now complete, in my opinion. I've maybe spent like an hour-ish total painting on it. Some things that happened off the screen. I did end up lightening my very top color. After I started painting, I realized it wasn't light enough. Like this right here is straight out white. So I wanted something just off of that. So I did lighten that, and anywhere that I had that super light color, I did go over that a couple more times. This one has been gone over a couple times, so a lot of the places that were thin have been made thicker. I can see a few little lines through it still, just because I'm using a mainly yellow, which is very see-through. I can still see some of my pencil lines, but you'll notice that you can't see them so much anymore where I had darker colors. So that is a-okay. It's just something to keep in mind whenever you're picking what color you want to use. Choking. All right. But over here, I want you to see the same picture. Oh dear, coughing a lot. This one was done by Miss Rodriguez, my colleague. So she chose to use blue instead. So she has her main blue right here, adding 2 different levels of white and adding 2 different levels of black. And she's done hers very similarly. She's come in and added in washes of color. She's not quite done with the eyes, but she's getting there. So you can do this in multiple different colors. So as long as you start with that same base main color and then you add your whites and your blacks to it, then you're going to be just fine. I do suggest, again, working from the back to the front. There's lots of different ways to be successful, but the main thing that you want to make sure of is that you have all 5 levels of color somewhere in your picture, and that you've added enough layers that you're not going to see through absolutely to all of your pencils. Another little tip would be try not to get too much water into your paintbrush, because that will end up with soggy pieces of paper, and then they end up really wavy, wobbly, and kind of weird. So use your water sparingly. Whenever you rinse out your brush, make sure that you dab off the excess water onto your paper towel, and you should be just fine. All of the acrylic paint dries just a smidgen darker than it was whenever it was wet. So you want to try and get as much done as possible per layer. Don't stop in the middle of a layer of color. you're going to end up that some areas end up kind of spotty and weird. So always finish your little layer before letting it dry. When you come back to it the next day, if you have to come back to it the next day with your saved paint, then yeah, just make sure that you're going piece by piece. You should be good.
Yay, have fun, guys.